Okay, I'm back. This is part two of my my history of SummerSlam from 1988 all the way to 1990. All the way to 2008. Now, I was talking about SummerSlam 1991. It wasn't really a memorable SummerSlam, only memorable for the Macho Man Randy Savage getting married to Miss Elizabeth and the Ultimate Warrior being fired from the WWF. But overall, it was an okay SummerSlam for what it was. Then moving over to 1992. 1992 SummerSlam was only memorable for a couple things. There was the match between Rick Martel and Shawn Michaels. These two were, it was sort of Shawn Michaels' SummerSlam's debut as a singles wrestler. So he went on and faced Rick Martel, and the stipulation of this match was the two couldn't really hit each other in the face. Overall, this match wasn't that good as it was just two guys wrestling and trying not to hit each other in the face. And then of course you had Sherry come out and get involved and then pass out, and really just not a very good matchup. Expected better from these two, but still is what you got. You also had the British Bulldog against Bret the Hitman Hart for the Intercontinental title. Now that match was probably one of the best Intercontinental title matches I ever seen, and Bret Hart will tell you that in his DVD. It's kind of up there with some of the greatest intercontinental title matches up there. The greatest intercontinental title matches of all time. And this match didn't disappoint as those two just went out there and they had a really good matchup. There was some kind of botch spots, but mainly it had something to do with the British Bulldog forgetting some of the moves Brett was supposed to do to him. But overall, it was still a very good matchup, very emotional. And then of course you had Diana Smith come into the ring and they embraced and hugged each other, and that kind of broke the tensions that those two had. And that was basically what the feud was. And then, of course, you had the Ultimate Warrior make his return to the WWF to challenge Macho Man Randy Savage for the Intercontinental title. Really, it was a very good matchup between the two. Those two just had a really good matchup, sort of almost the same as their WrestleMania 7 matchup, but it was way better than their WrestleMania 7 matchup. Well, kind of a little bit better. But the only thing that kind of killed the match from being even greater was the interference. Could have did without the interference from that matchup, but still, it was a very good matchup, highly enjoyable, and it sort of set up things between Ric Flair and the Macho Man Randy Savage. And then of course it had the Undertaker and Kamala for the casket matchup, which settled the feud between the Undertaker and Kamala, and which was an okay casket match. Overall, SummerSlam 1992 had some good matches, and then they had some stinkers on that pay-per-view, like Nails versus Virgil, the Natural Disasters versus the Beverly Brothers in a squash matchup. And then, of course, they had the Legion of Doom against Money Inc. in a match that should have been good but wasn't good, mainly to the fact that it was too short. And then, of course, they had that count out ending, which made Money Inc. look like complete losers, and it just didn't. It made the Legion of Doom just not look that good at all. Really, not a very good matchup. Overall, like I said, this pay per view was okay, but really it was only known for a couple of matches on this pay per view. But overall, the undercard stunk. But overall, it was an okay pay per view for what it was. And then moving over to the 1993 SummerSlam. Now, this pay per view was just a big letdown. It was a stinker, and it showed that the WWF was sort of going down on hard times. Really, the undercard on this pay per view wasn't really that good. You had IRS against the 1-2-3 Kid in an okay matchup. You had Ted DiBiase in his final SummerSlam matchup against Razor Ramon, in which was a really good matchup, and Ted DiBiase put Razor Ramon over big time in that matchup, and he sold well for him, I believe he injured his back in this matchup. And then of course you had Ludwig Borga against Marty Jannetty in a match that sort of propelled Ludwig Borga as one of the most over heels in the WWE. Of course that didn't work, so they sort of dropped the character, but still, that match got him over. You had the awful Rest in Peace matchup between The Undertaker and Giant Gonzalez. And then, of course, you had the most disappointing matchup on that pay per view, as they hyped that match for months. It was Shawn Michaels against Mr. Perfect for the IC title. Now, this match should have been good, but really, it was just disappointing because it was just short, and then the fact that these two just didn't really put on anything good in this matchup or anything memorable in this matchup. Now, like what Spinnernet said in his thing of the history of SummerSlam. These two could put on good matches. I mean, this is Mr. Perfect and Shawn Michaels. These two were known for having good matches around that year. And Mr. Perfect was well known for putting on good matches with just about anybody. But you could tell the flow of this matchup didn't go well, and the chemistry just didn't work well in this matchup. And overall, just a not so good matchup. But overall, and then of course you had the main event with Lex Luger against Yokozuna. Really, it was an okay matchup for what it was, but the ending kind of hurt this matchup as they've been building Lex Luger to sort of take down Yokozuna and win the WWF title from him. But in the end, Lex Luger ended up winning by countout, and then of course the WWF celebrated like Luger just won the Super Bowl or something. Really, really just made Luger look total. It just made Luger look like a dork, sort of. It made him look useless after that finish. And then, of course, the crowd celebrating and like he just won the WWF title. It was just stupid, and I don't know why the WWF went through with that, but they did. And overall, this SummerSlam was just one of the worst SummerSlams of all time. And you can pretty much show that the WWF was sort of going through hard times, and there were sort of guys not looking good, and they were trying to find their main event star, and really wasn't showing this pay-per-view. Overall, not a very good pay-per-view. SummerSlam 1994 sort of picked up from what SummerSlam 1993 had. This had some really good matches. You had the underrated Diesel versus Shawn Michaels. I mean, underrated Diesel versus Razor Ramon for the IC title. Very good matchup, highly underrated. One of those matches that most people tend to not talk about, but it was a very good matchup. Something really you didn't expect much from these two, but these two just let it out, let it hang out, and they put on a very good matchup. You had the steel cage matchup between Bret and Owen, where those two just went around how most steel cage matches are supposed to be done, where you're supposed to have blood and beat the hell out of each other. Those two went around it and had a very technical style type of steel cage matchup, and that's what those two had in this matchup. Very good matchup, by the way, and then the ending was very good when the whole family got involved in that matchup. You had Alundra Blaze versus Bull Nakano in a very good matchup. You had Tatanka, Lex Luger in an okay matchup, but the match is only memorable for Tatanka's heel turn and Tatanka beating the hell out of Lex Luger and joining the $1 Million Corporation. You had the Undertaker versus Undertaker matchup, which was not that good of a matchup, but really it was the crowd sort of got into it as they built this match for months, Undertaker turning heel and joining the corporation. But still, it was an okay matchup for what it was, but still one of the worst matches on that pay-per-view. But overall, very good SummerSlam. And like I said, it sort of picked up from what SummerSlam 1993 didn't have. Some good matches, some matches that had feuds that got settled, and storylines that led into the following couple pay-per-views and then the following year. But overall, very good pay-per-view. Probably one of my favorite SummerSlams of all time, mainly because the undercard was pretty good and the main event were pretty good in this matchup. Overall, very good SummerSlam. Give this a thumbs up. And then moving over to SummerSlam 1995. Whew, this pay-per-view was a stinker. This was like a one-match show overall. And if you know what I'm talking about, then if you don't know what I'm talking about, then you'll know now. The one match was pretty much the Razor Ramon versus Shawn Michaels matchup. It was a rematch from their ladder match at WrestleMania 10. That was a very good matchup, and they sort of topped everything they did at WrestleMania 10, and then sort of told a good story with the two men learning from their mistakes from the previous ladder match of sort of getting away from what they did wrong at WrestleMania 10. Told a real good story. Very good matchup. Originally, it was supposed to be Sid versus Shawn Michaels, but they knew that match was going to stink, so they sort of went with the Razor Ramon Shawn Michaels match, and thank God, because that's the only reason to watch this pay-per-view, as this was a very good matchup. Then, of course, the undercard was some stinkers on the undercard. Of course, there was the 1-2-3 Kid versus Hakushi. Very good matchup, and it showed how underrated Hakushi and the 1-2-3 Kid were. Yeah, Bret versus Isaac Yankem, not Bret Hart's good matchup in 1995. Triple H's debut against Bob Holly, okay matchup, and then of course the atrocious main event between Mabel and Diesel. Overall,